Marcus Thompson sat on the cold kitchen floor, his small hands wrapped around a piece of stale bread. The 8-year-old boy had learned not to cry when his stomach hurt from hunger. Crying only made things worse in his house. His mother Linda was sleeping on the couch again. She had been there for 2 days now, and Marcus knew better than to wake her up. The last time he tried, she screamed at him and threw an empty bottle across the room. The bottle broke against the wall, and Marcus had to clean up the glass pieces with his bare hands. The apartment was dark and dirty. Empty beer cans and food containers covered every surface. The smell was so bad that Marcus had gotten used to breathing through his mouth. He wished he could open the windows, but Linda always kept them locked. She said people were watching them, but Marcus never saw anyone outside. Marcus had not been to school in 3 weeks. He missed his teacher, Mrs. Brown, who always smiled at him and gave him extra cookies during snack time. At school, he felt safe. At school, adults were kind to him. But Linda said school was stupid and teachers were liars who wanted to take him away from her. The boy spent most of his days alone, watching cartoons on their old television when it worked. Sometimes the power was turned off because Linda forgot to pay the bills. During those times, Marcus would sit by the window and watch other children play outside. They looked happy. They looked clean. They had parents who came to pick them up and hold their hands. Marcus wondered what it felt like to have a parent hold his hand. Mrs. Garcia lived next door and sometimes heard Marcus crying through the thin walls. She was an old woman who spoke broken English, but she had kind eyes. Once she knocked on their door and tried to give Marcus a sandwich. Linda got very angry and told Mrs. Garcia to mind her own business. After that, Mrs. Garcia would leave food outside their door when Linda was not looking. One morning, Marcus woke up to find Linda shaking badly. Her hands moved in ways that scared him, and she was talking to people who were not there. She kept saying that someone was coming to get them, that they needed to hide. Marcus tried to calm her down, but she pushed him away so hard that he fell and hit his head on the coffee table. Blood ran down his forehead, but Linda did not seem to notice. She was too busy looking out the window and talking to herself. Marcus found a dirty towel and pressed it against his head until the bleeding stopped. The cut left a small scar that would stay with him forever. That afternoon, Mrs. Garcia heard loud noises coming from the apartment. She heard Linda screaming and things being thrown around. She also heard Marcus crying, begging his mother to please stop. Mrs. Garcia had heard enough. She picked up her phone and called the number she had been thinking about calling for months. When the police arrived, they found Linda sitting in the middle of the living room, surrounded by broken dishes and furniture. She was holding a knife and muttering about enemies who wanted to hurt her. Marcus was hiding in his bedroom closet, trying to make himself as small as possible. The police officers were gentle with Marcus. One of them, Officer Johnson, knelt down and spoke to him in a soft voice. He asked Marcus if he was hurt and if he needed help. Marcus was afraid to answer. Linda always told him that police were bad people who would take him away and hurt him, but Officer Johnson had kind eyes, just like Mrs. Brown at school. He did not yell or grab Marcus. Instead, he waited patiently until Marcus felt brave enough to come out of the closet. When Marcus finally stepped out, Officer Johnson noticed the old scar on his forehead and the bruises on his arms. A woman in a nice dress came with the police. She said her name was Carol and that she worked with children who needed help. Carol explained to Marcus that his mother was sick and needed to go to a special place where doctors could help her feel better. She said Marcus would need to stay somewhere else for a while, somewhere safe. Marcus did not understand everything Carol was saying, but he understood that he was leaving. He watched as other police officers helped Linda into an ambulance. She was still talking to people who were not there, and she did not look at Marcus when they took her away. Carol helped Marcus pack his few belongings into a black garbage bag. He did not have many things, just some old clothes that were too small and a stuffed dog that he had found in the trash. The stuffed dog was missing one eye, but Marcus loved it because it was soft and never hurt him. As they left the apartment, Mrs. Garcia came out of her door. She had tears in her eyes as she hugged Marcus goodbye. She pressed a small bag into his hands and said something in Spanish that sounded like a prayer. Inside the bag were 3 cookies and a note that said, "Be strong, little one," in her shaky handwriting. Carol drove Marcus to a big building downtown. She explained that this was where children stayed when they needed new homes. Marcus pressed his face against the car window and watched his old neighborhood disappear. He felt scared and sad, but also something else he could not name. Later, he would realize that feeling was relief. The building was clean and bright. Nothing like his old apartment. There were other children there, some his age and some older. They all looked tired and quiet, just like Marcus felt. A nice woman named Susan showed Marcus to a small room with a bed, a dresser, and a window that actually opened. That night, Marcus lay in the clean bed and held his one-eyed stuffed dog tight. For the first time in months, he fell asleep without worrying about what would happen when he woke up. He did not know that his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. He did not know that somewhere in the city, a woman named Grace Johnson was getting ready to open her heart and home to a broken little boy who just needed someone to love him. All Marcus knew was that tonight, he was safe. And for an 8-year-old boy who had seen too much pain, that was enough for now. Grace Johnson was sitting at her kitchen table, drinking her morning coffee when the phone rang. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw it was 7 in the morning. Calls this early usually meant one thing: another child needed help. Grace had been a foster mother for 12 years. She was 45 years old and worked as a social worker at the county office. Her own daughter Kelly was 20 years old and away at college studying to become a teacher. The house felt too quiet, without Kelly's laughter filling the rooms. "Hello, Grace, this is Carol from the placement office," the voice on the phone said. "We have a situation with an 8-year-old boy. His name is Marcus Thompson. He's been through 3 foster homes in the past 2 years, and none of them worked out." Grace listened as Carol explained Marcus's story. The boy had been removed from his mother's care after years of neglect. He had trust issues and would often act out when he felt scared or unsafe. The last foster family returned him to the system after he broke a window during what they called a tantrum. "He's not a bad kid, Grace," Carol said. "He's just hurt, really hurt. I know you were thinking about taking a break from fostering, but I thought maybe—" Grace looked around her empty kitchen. She had indeed been thinking about taking a break. Fostering children was hard work and she was getting tired. But something in Carol's voice made her pause. She had never been able to say no to a child who needed help. "Tell me more about him," Grace said quietly. Carol explained that Marcus barely spoke to adults and had trouble sleeping. He hoarded food in his room because he was afraid there would not be enough to eat. He flinched when people moved too quickly around him. He had never learned how to trust that adults would take care of him. "I'll take him," Grace said before Carol could finish talking. "When can he come?" That afternoon, Grace watched from her front window as Carol's car pulled into the driveway. A small boy got out of the back seat carrying a black garbage bag that seemed too big for his thin body. His clothes were clean but did not fit him well. His dark hair needed cutting, and his eyes looked much older than 8 years should look. Marcus stood on Grace's front porch and stared at his feet, while Carol knocked on the door. When Grace opened it, she knelt down so she would be at Marcus's eye level. She had learned that looking down at scared children only made them feel smaller. "Hi, Marcus," she said in a soft voice. "My name is Grace. Welcome to my home." Marcus did not answer. He clutched his garbage bag tighter and looked past Grace into the house. Grace could see him checking for dangers, looking for places to hide if he needed to run. Her heart broke a little, seeing how afraid this small boy was. Grace showed Marcus to the bedroom that would be his. It was Kelly's old room, painted light blue with stars on the ceiling that glowed in the dark. There was a small bed with a warm quilt, a dresser for his clothes, and a bookshelf filled with children's books. The window looked out over the backyard where Grace grew vegetables and flowers. Marcus set his garbage bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. He did not touch anything else. Grace sat in the chair by the window and waited. She had learned that pushing scared children to talk or be friendly never worked. They needed time to feel safe first. "Are you hungry?" Grace asked after a few minutes. Marcus nodded but did not look at her. Grace went to the kitchen and made him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. She put it on a plate with some apple slices and a glass of milk. When she brought it back to the room, Marcus ate quickly, like someone might take the food away from him. That first week was hard. Marcus barely spoke except to say, "Yes, ma'am," or "No, ma'am," when Grace asked him direct questions. He ate his meals in silence and spent most of his time in his room. At night, Grace could hear him crying quietly through the walls. But when she knocked on his door to check on him, he would stop and pretend to be asleep. Grace did not give up. Every morning she made Marcus breakfast and packed him a lunch for school. She drove him to school and picked him up every day, even though he never thanked her. She helped him with his homework at the kitchen table, patiently explaining math problems and reading assignments. Marcus was smart, but he had missed so much school that he was behind other children his age. Grace worked with his teachers to get him extra help. She celebrated every small success. When he got a good grade on a spelling test, when he remembered to raise his hand before speaking in class, when he made it through a whole day without getting in trouble. Slowly, very slowly, Marcus began to change. After 3 weeks, he started eating dinner at the table with Grace instead of taking his plate to his room. After a month, he began to talk about his day at school. He told Grace about his teacher, Mr. Davis, who was teaching him to play chess. He mentioned a girl named Amy, who shared her crayons with him during art class. Grace noticed that Marcus had stopped hoarding food in his room. He no longer flinched when she moved quickly around the kitchen. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with curious eyes instead of fearful ones. One evening, while Grace was making dinner, Marcus came into the kitchen and asked if he could help. Grace was so surprised that she almost dropped the pot she was holding. She showed him how to wash vegetables and set the table. They worked together in comfortable silence, and Grace felt something warm growing in her chest. The breakthrough came 2 months after Marcus arrived. Grace was in the living room folding laundry when she heard a noise from the kitchen. She went to investigate and found Marcus sitting on the floor crying. He had dropped a glass of water, and it had broken on the tile floor. "I'm sorry," Marcus sobbed. "I didn't mean to break it. Please don't send me away. I'll be good, I promise." Grace felt tears come to her own eyes. She knelt down beside Marcus and gently pulled him into her arms. For the first time since he had arrived, he did not pull away from her touch. "Oh, honey," Grace whispered, "you're not going anywhere. This is your home now. Breaking a glass doesn't change that. Nothing you could do would make me send you away." Marcus cried harder, and Grace held him until his tears stopped. When he finally looked up at her, something had changed in his eyes. The fear was still there, but now there was something else too. Hope. From that day forward, Marcus began to bloom like one of Grace's flowers in the spring. He started calling her Miss Grace instead of ma'am. He would sit with her on the couch to watch television in the evenings. He even smiled sometimes, and when he did, his whole face lit up. Grace knew she was falling in love with this brave little boy who had survived so much pain. She also knew that Marcus was beginning to love her back, even though he was still too scared to say it out loud. But love was patient. Grace had learned that from years of fostering children who needed time to heal. She would wait as long as it took for Marcus to feel safe enough to open his heart completely. And when that day came, she would be ready to love him with everything she had. Marcus was 16 years old when the letter arrived. He was sitting at the kitchen table doing his math homework when Grace walked in from getting the mail. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking as she held a white envelope. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, looking up from his textbook. Grace sat down across from him and took a deep breath. "Marcus, this letter is from the court. Your mother, Linda, she wants to see you." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had not heard his mother's name spoken out loud in 8 years. In his mind, Grace was his mother now. Grace was the one who made his lunch every morning, helped him with homework, and took care of him when he was sick. Grace was the one who taught him how to ride a bike and cheered at his baseball games. "I don't understand," Marcus said quietly. Grace opened the letter and read it slowly. Linda Thompson had completed a drug treatment program at a state facility. She had been clean for 2 years and was living in a halfway house. She wanted to rebuild her relationship with her son. Her lawyer had filed papers asking the court to give her custody of Marcus again. She says she's better now, Grace explained, trying to keep her voice calm. She wants you to come live with her. Marcus felt like he could not breathe. The kitchen seemed to spin around him. All the memories he had tried to forget came rushing back. The hunger, the fear, the nights when Linda screamed at people who were not there. He remembered the scar on his forehead and how it felt to hide in the closet. I don't want to go, Marcus whispered. Grace, please. I want to stay here with you. Grace reached across the table and took his hand. I want you to stay too, sweetheart. But the law is complicated. She's your biological mother, and the court has to consider her rights too. Over the next few weeks, Marcus learned more about what was happening. A social worker named Mr. Peterson came to the house to interview him. Mr. Peterson asked Marcus questions about his life with Grace and what he remembered about living with Linda. Do you want to see your birth mother? Mr. Peterson asked. Marcus thought for a long time. Part of him was curious about Linda. He wondered if she really was different now. But mostly, he felt scared. What if seeing her brought back all the bad feelings? What if she tried to take him away from Grace? Maybe, Marcus said finally. But I want Grace to be there too. The first meeting was arranged at the social services office. Marcus sat between Grace and Mr. Peterson in a small room with uncomfortable chairs. When Linda walked in, Marcus barely recognized her. She looked older and thinner than he remembered. Her hair was shorter and neat, and she wore clean clothes. But her eyes were the same, sad and tired. She sat down across from Marcus and stared at him for a long time without speaking. You've grown so much, Linda said finally. Her voice was different too, quieter than Marcus remembered. Hi, Marcus said. He did not know what else to say to this woman who was supposed to be his mother but felt like a stranger. Linda told Marcus about the treatment center where she had lived for almost 3 years. She said she had learned about her mental illness and how to take medicine that helped her think clearly. She said she was sorry for the things that happened when he was little. I want to make it up to you, Linda said. I want us to be a family, again. Marcus looked at Grace, who was sitting quietly beside him. Grace had taught him that families were not just about blood. Families were about people who took care of each other, who were there when you needed them, who loved you even when you made mistakes. Grace is my family, Marcus said softly. Linda's face changed. Marcus could see hurt in her eyes, but also something that looked like understanding. The visits continued for several months. Sometimes Linda came to Grace's house for dinner. Sometimes Marcus met her at the park or at a restaurant. Linda was trying hard to be a good mother, but Marcus felt like he was getting to know a stranger, not remembering someone he had once known. Linda brought him presents, books and clothes and games. She asked about school and his friends. She wanted to know everything about his life with Grace. Sometimes Marcus felt guilty because he could see how much Linda wanted him to love her, but he did not feel the same way about her that he felt about Grace. Grace never said anything bad about Linda in front of Marcus. She encouraged him to give his birth mother a chance, but Marcus could see that Grace was worried. He noticed that she held him a little tighter when she hugged him goodnight. He saw her wiping away tears when she thought he was not looking. One evening, Linda's lawyer called Grace. The lawyer said that Linda was ready to file for full custody of Marcus. She had a job now and her own apartment. The court date was set for February. That night, Marcus could not sleep. He went to Grace's room and knocked on her door. Grace was sitting up in bed, reading a book, but Marcus could tell she had been crying. Can I talk to you? Marcus asked. Grace patted the bed beside her and Marcus climbed up. They sat together in the quiet darkness for a while. Are you going to fight for me? Marcus asked. Grace took a deep breath. Marcus, I love you more than anything in this world. You are my son in every way that matters to me. But I also think Linda loves you too, and she's trying to do better. But what do you want? Marcus asked. I want what's best for you. Grace said, "and I want you to be happy and safe, wherever that might be." Marcus felt tears starting to come. "Grace, you saved my life. Before I came here, I didn't know what love felt like. I didn't know that adults could be kind and patient. You taught me how to trust people. You made me feel like I was worth something." Grace pulled him close. "Oh, sweetheart, you were always worth everything. I just helped you see it." "I don't want to hurt Linda's feelings," Marcus said, "but you're my mom. You're the only mom I really remember. If the judge asks me what I want, I'm going to tell the truth." Grace held him tighter. "Whatever happens, I will always love you. Nothing can change that. Not a judge, not a court order, nothing." As the court date got closer, Marcus felt more and more nervous. He knew that in a few weeks, he would have to stand in front of a judge and choose between the woman who gave birth to him and the woman who raised him. He knew that his choice would hurt someone he cared about, but Marcus also knew something else. He knew that Grace had taught him to be honest and brave. She had taught him that love was not about what people said, but about what they did. And when the time came to speak in that courtroom, Marcus would tell the truth about who had really been his mother all these years. The night before the hearing, Grace made Marcus's favorite dinner, fried chicken and mashed potatoes. They ate, quietly, both of them thinking about what tomorrow would bring. "No matter what happens," Grace said as she tucked him into bed, "I am proud of the young man you've become. You are kind and smart and brave, and I am honored to have been your mother for these years." Marcus hugged her tight. "You'll always be my mom, Grace, always." The courthouse was cold and gray on the morning of February 15th. Marcus sat in the back seat of Grace's car, wearing his best shirt and tie. His hands were shaking, and his stomach felt sick. Grace had made him breakfast, but he could barely eat 2 bites. "It's going to be okay," Grace said, looking at him in the rearview mirror. "Just tell the truth, sweetheart, that's all you have to do." Marcus nodded, but he did not feel okay. Today, a judge would decide where he would live for the rest of his childhood. Today, he would have to choose between Linda and Grace in front of a room full of strangers. Judge Patricia Williams had been on the bench for 20 years. She had seen hundreds of custody cases, but this one felt different. She had watched Marcus grow up through the court system. She remembered the scared 8-year-old boy who had been removed from his mother's care. Now he was 16 almost, a man, and she could see the strength in his eyes that had not been there before. The courtroom was packed. Linda sat at one table with her lawyer, Mr. Rodriguez. She wore a simple blue dress and kept her hands folded in her lap. Grace sat at another table with her lawyer, Mrs. Bennett. Between them were social workers, court officials, and people from the community who had come to support both women. Marcus sat in the front row behind Grace. Every few minutes, she would turn around and give him an encouraging smile. He tried to smile back, but his face felt frozen. "Your Honor," Mr. Rodriguez began, "my client, Linda Thompson, has worked very hard to overcome her addiction and mental health issues. She has completed treatment, maintained sobriety for over 2 years, and has stable housing and employment. She deserves the chance to be a mother to her son." Mr. Rodriguez presented letters from Linda's doctors and therapists. He showed the judge photos of Linda's small but clean apartment. He talked about the job she had at a grocery store and how she had never missed a day of work in 8 months. "Linda Thompson made mistakes in the past," Mr. Rodriguez said, "but she has paid for those mistakes. She has earned the right to have her son back." Mrs. Bennett stood up when it was her turn to speak. "Your Honor, while we respect Mrs. Thompson's efforts to improve her life, we must consider what is best for Marcus. He has lived with Grace Johnson for 8 years. She has been his parent in every meaningful way." Mrs. Bennett talked about Marcus's grades, which had improved from failing to honor roll. She mentioned his participation in the school's chess club and baseball team. She brought up the strong relationships he had built with teachers and neighbors in Grace's community. "Marcus Thompson has thrived under Grace Johnson's care," Mrs. Bennett said. "To remove him now would be traumatic and harmful to his development." Judge Williams listened carefully to both lawyers. She read through thick files full of reports and evaluations. She looked at photos and letters and test results. but she knew that the most important voice in this courtroom had not yet been heard. "I would like to hear from Marcus Thompson," Judge Williams said. The courtroom became very quiet. Marcus felt every eye in the room watching him as he walked to the witness stand. His legs felt weak, and his heart was beating so fast he thought everyone could hear it. The court clerk asked Marcus to raise his right hand. "Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Judge Williams leaned forward. She had a kind face and her voice was gentle when she spoke to Marcus. "Marcus, I know this is difficult for you. Take your time and just tell me what you're thinking and feeling." Marcus looked around the courtroom. He saw Linda watching him with hopeful eyes. He saw Grace trying not to cry. He saw all the people who had come to support both women. For a moment, he felt like he could not speak at all. "Your Honor," Marcus began slowly, "I know that Linda gave birth to me. I know that makes her my mother in one way, and I can see that she's trying to be better. I don't want to hurt her feelings." He paused and took a deep breath. Judge Williams nodded encouragingly. "But I need to tell you about the woman who saved my life." Marcus continued, his voice getting stronger. "When I came to Grace's house 8 years ago, I was broken. I was angry and scared, and I didn't trust anybody. I thought all adults were dangerous." Marcus looked directly at Grace. She was crying now, but she was also smiling. "Grace never gave up on me, even when I was mean to her. Even when I broke things or had nightmares or refused to talk. She was patient with me when I didn't deserve patience. She loved me when I didn't know how to love her back." The courtroom was so quiet that Marcus could hear people breathing. "Grace taught me how to ride a bike. She came to every baseball game, even the ones where I struck out every time. When I had trouble reading, she sat with me every night until I got better. When kids at school made fun of my old clothes, she took me shopping and let me pick out things I liked." Marcus's voice cracked. A little, but he kept talking. "Grace taught me what a family really is. It's not just about blood. It's about showing up every day. It's about making breakfast in the morning and helping with homework at night. It's about loving someone even when they make mistakes." Judge Williams was watching Marcus carefully. She could see the emotion in his face, but also the certainty. "Your Honor, I respect Linda for trying to get better. I hope she continues to do well. But Grace Johnson is my mother. She has been my mother in every way that matters for 8 years. Marcus turned to look directly at Grace, and his voice was clear and strong. "Grace, you taught me what love looks like. You showed me that I was worth saving. You are my mom, and nothing will ever change that." For a moment, the entire courtroom was completely silent. Judge Williams wiped her eyes with a tissue. Several people in the gallery were crying. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. Grace stood up from her chair, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too, son," she said softly. Linda was crying as well, but she was also nodding. In that moment, she understood something important. Being a mother was not about what you wanted or what you deserved. It was about what was best for your child. Judge Williams took several minutes to compose herself. She had presided over thousands of cases, but she had never heard testimony quite like this. The love between Marcus and Grace was obvious to everyone in the room. "This court will take a brief recess," Judge Williams announced. "I need some time to consider everything I have heard today." As people filed out of the courtroom, Marcus walked over to Linda. She looked up at him with sad but understanding eyes. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. Linda reached out and touched his hand. "Don't be sorry, honey. That woman raised a good man. I can see that you're happy and healthy, and that's all I ever really wanted for you." Marcus felt some of the weight lift from his shoulders. He had told the truth, and even though it was painful, it felt right. Now he just had to wait for the judge to decide his future. Judge Williams sat alone in her chambers, staring at the files spread across her desk. In 20 years on the bench, she had never heard testimony that moved her as much as Marcus's words. The young man's love for Grace Johnson was clear and deep. But the law was complicated, and she had to consider more than just emotions. She picked up Linda Thompson's file and read through it again. The woman had truly turned her life around. Her doctor said she was stable on her medication. Her therapist reported excellent progress. Her employer gave her good reviews. By all legal standards, Linda deserved a chance to parent her biological son. But Judge Williams also thought about Marcus. She had watched him grow from a terrified 8-year-old into a confident young man. That transformation had happened under Grace's care. Grace had given Marcus something that could not be measured in court documents. She had given him love, stability, and hope. After an hour, Judge Williams made her decision. She walked back into the courtroom where everyone was waiting nervously. Marcus sat in the front row holding Grace's hand. Linda sat with her lawyer looking pale but calm. "This has been one of the most difficult cases I have ever presided over," Judge Williams began. "I have 2 women here who both love Marcus Thompson. I have a young man who has clearly been well cared for and has grown into someone we can all be proud of." She looked directly at Linda. "Mrs. Thompson, I want to acknowledge the tremendous work you have done to overcome your addiction and mental illness. Your efforts to rebuild your life are admirable, and you should be proud of how far you have come." Linda nodded, tears already starting to form in her eyes. "However," Judge Williams continued, "this case is not about what any adult deserves. It is about what is best for Marcus. After 8 years in Grace Johnson's care, Marcus has formed bonds that cannot and should not be broken." Marcus felt Grace squeeze his hand tighter. "Therefore, I am granting permanent guardianship of Marcus Thompson to Grace Johnson. This guardianship will remain in effect until Marcus reaches the age of 18. The courtroom erupted in quiet, celebrations and sighs of relief. Grace covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Marcus felt like a huge weight had been lifted from his chest. He was going to stay home. He was going to stay with his real mom. But Judge Williams was not finished speaking. "However, I also believe that Linda Thompson has earned the right to be part of her son's life if he chooses to allow it. I am ordering supervised visitation twice a month, with the possibility of increased contact if all parties agree." Judge Williams looked at both women. "I want you to understand something. Family is not about winning or losing. Family is about love and support, and doing what is best for the children involved. Marcus is lucky to have 2 women who care about him so much." She turned to Marcus. "Young man, you have 2 people here who love you. One gave you life, and one gave you a life worth living. I hope you will find room in your heart for both of them." After the hearing, Marcus, Grace, and Linda stood together in the courthouse hallway. For a few minutes, nobody knew what to say. Then Linda stepped forward and looked at Grace. "Thank you," Linda said quietly. "Thank you for loving my son when I couldn't. Thank you for taking care of him and making him into this wonderful young man." Grace reached out and hugged Linda. "He's a special boy. You should be proud of him." Linda turned to Marcus. "I know I wasn't a good mother to you when you were little. I know Grace is your real mom now. But if you're willing, I would like to try to be your friend. I would like to get to know the person you've become." Marcus thought for a moment. He looked at Grace, who nodded encouragingly. "I would like that too," Marcus said. "Maybe we can start slowly and see how it goes." Linda smiled through her tears. "I would like that very much." Over the next 2 years, the 3 of them worked together to build a new kind of family. Linda came to Marcus's baseball games and sat with Grace in the stands. She attended his high school graduation and cried when he gave his speech as class president. She learned about his interests and his friends and his plans for college. Marcus never called Linda Mom, but he grew to care about her as a person. He saw how hard she worked to stay healthy and how much she wanted to be part of his life. Slowly, he forgave her for the pain of his early childhood. He understood that she had been sick, not evil. Grace welcomed Linda into their lives with grace and kindness. She never felt threatened by Linda's presence because she knew that Marcus's love for her was secure. Sometimes the 3 of them had dinner together, and Grace could see how happy it made Marcus to have both women in his life. When Marcus turned 18, he had a big party at Grace's house. All his friends from school came, along with his teachers and neighbors. Linda was there too, helping Grace serve cake and watching Marcus laugh with his friends. That fall, Marcus left for college on a full scholarship. He was going to study social work because he wanted to help children like himself. Grace and Linda both drove him to campus and helped him move into his dorm room. "I'm so proud of you," Grace said as she hugged him goodbye. "Me too," Linda added. "You're going to change the world, Marcus." Marcus looked at both women, the one who had given him life and the one who had taught him how to live it. "Thank you. Both for everything. I love you." 4 years later, Marcus graduated from college with honors. Grace and Linda sat together in the front row, cheering as he walked across the stage. After the ceremony, Marcus found them in the crowd. "Mom," he said to Grace, "thank you for never giving up on me." Then he turned to Linda, "And thank you for fighting to get better. I'm proud of how far you've come." Judge Williams was also at the graduation. She had followed Marcus's story over the years and was amazed by how well everything had turned out. After the ceremony, she approached the three of them. "This is what justice looks like," she told them. "Not just following the law, but doing what creates the most love and healing for everyone involved." Marcus went on to become a social worker, just as he had planned. He specialized in helping children in foster care find permanent families. He often told people that he had been lucky enough to have 2 mothers, one who gave him life and one who taught him how to live it. Grace continued fostering children until she retired at 65. She helped dozens of kids over the years, but Marcus always held a special place in her heart. He was her son in every way that mattered. Linda rebuilt her life completely. She got married to a kind man who understood her past and supported her recovery. She became a volunteer at a treatment center, helping other women overcome addiction. She stayed close to Marcus and Grace, grateful for the second chance they had given her. Years later, when Marcus got married, both Grace and Linda walked him down the aisle. When his first child was born, both women were in the hospital waiting room. The little girl had 2 grandmothers who loved her completely. Marcus often thought about that day in the courtroom when he was 16 years old. He remembered how scared he had been to tell the truth about who his real mother was. But telling that truth had not destroyed his relationship with Linda. It had actually made it possible for them to build something new and honest together. Love, Marcus learned, was not about choosing sides. Love was about opening your heart wide enough to include everyone who cared about you. And in the end, that was exactly what happened. He had not lost a mother that day in court. He had gained a family